Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Taylor, the undergraduate exercise science program director and associate teaching professor here at the University of Kansas. Today we have a special guest, strength and conditioning coach Joseph Potts. Coach Potts owns and operates TopSpeed Strength and Conditioning, a private sports performance training and physical therapy center in Lenexa, Kansas. Coach Potts is a registered strength and conditioning coach through the National Strength and Conditioning Association and a corrective exercise specialist through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. He holds a bachelor's degree in exercise science from the University of Kansas, where he played for the KU football team. Coach Potts is dedicated to helping his clients maximize their athletic abilities, improve sports performance, and prevent injury. Welcome to the show, Coach Potts.
Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
So tell us about your background as a strength and conditioning coach. Which teams and athletes have you worked with previously?
So I originally got my start coaching when I was in the master's program at KU. As part of my practicum, I was assigned to Lawrence Free State High School to function as their strength coach. And there I was fortunate to have some high-profile athletes, along with YouTube and recruiting services, just getting their start. So because so many of those guys ended up going D1 and being high-ranking prospects, we got a lot of media coverage. And that led to the Kansas City Royals reaching out and asking me if I'd be interested in applying for a position they had open. And I did, got the position. And after my first year with Kansas City, I was elevated to the role of speed development coordinator as well. So I added that title. And during that time, I had some collegiate football teams reach out and try to hire me. I know there was one time mid-season I flew out to Hofstra University, and they interviewed me for a position, which fortunately I didn't take because a couple years later they terminated the football program.
Right.
But I've done some consulting for schools in the SEC, for schools in the Big 12, for schools in the Big 10, some Division II schools. Do that in addition to my private practice at TopSpeed.
All right. So you train athletes of all levels. I mean, you train high school, college, professional at TopSpeed. Can you explain your training approach for those athletes and kind of how it may be similar or different at each level?
The way I look at kids is youth, which I consider pre-puberty, adolescence, and then the professional guys. And I kind of throw the collegiate guys in there with the professional because I think it's only 7% of high school athletes go on to play collegiately. So I consider them upper level guys and girls. So with youth, they're pretty much all on a level playing field. Puberty hasn't set in, so the hormones aren't really a factor. With them, it's mostly, can you get them stronger, and can you teach them coordination,
Right.
rhythm, body control, because that will skyrocket their performance and also help keep them healthy.
Building a base.
Yeah, exactly. So with high school, it's a little different, especially the ones I see, because they're team sport athletes for the most part. 90+% of them lift with their school already. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, most high school sport coaches use absolute load as their barometer for performance. This kid squats this much, he benches this much. Well, that takes the strength element out of my hands. I don't really need to worry about that. So I can focus more on like the speed end of the spectrum. That way,
Fill in the gaps.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
We function in a supplementary fashion. That's the phrase I use exactly. We fill the gaps. So with them, we tend to focus on unilateral and isolateral along with the speed element because obviously that works synergistically to create a more powerful athlete. The professionals are the ones where they tend to fall into one of two categories. You got the ones that are so genetically gifted that anything you do works for them.
Right.
With them, it's kind of a matter of keeping things new and novel, keeping them interested. Then you got the other end where hey, you need a highly specific program tailored to your individual needs assessment. Those are the ones that it's kind of fun because it's a puzzle that you're trying to put together.
Right.
But that's kind of how I approach each level.
Right. Yeah. All right. So what type of program design and techniques do you most commonly use to improve athletic performance? And we could talk for days about this, but just maybe give one or two examples of what you really like to use for athletes of all levels.
So with the youth, again, we're pretty much just focusing on strength and teaching them movement quality. So it might be sprint mechanics, especially with baseball players. Baseball players tend to have really poor running mechanics. And then really basic strength exercises, just building that base, like you said. With the high school kids, because we can focus more on the speed, power end of things, we don't do a lot of benching. We don't do a lot of squatting. Again, that's just how us, because I'm in the private sector. So we do a lot of sled. We do a lot of PAP.
Right.
That's my big thing right now is chronic exposure to PAP.
Post-activation potentiation, look it up.
And the results have been phenomenal.
Right.
In fact, that's what my whole presentation for the baseball summit was about. And the feedback from coaches has just been kind of staggering because they're all like, man, I'd never considered this. Right. But, in PAP, because it's got that high plyometric quality to it, you're influencing tendon stiffness as well as strength and power, which I think is understated.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully, like you said, hopefully the strength coaches they're working with at the high school, they're doing those foundational multi-joint lifts, the squat, bench. I mean, someone may be teaching power cleans and things like that, and then you're just rounding them out. I mean, you're just making them a more well-rounded athlete. All right, so what trends do you currently see in the field of strength and conditioning? Where do you think the field is headed in the future?
Right now, the biggest trend is the rise of technology. It's really not uncommon now to see high schools using digital timing systems and creating a ranking system for their athletes. So they're creating a culture of competition, which is good. GPS monitors aren't really that uncommon. It tends to be mostly the coastal schools that are using them. You don't see it a lot in the Midwest. We have a few that we will loan out to athletes to wear in game. But I mean, I've got less than a handful. I see schools in South Carolina and New York having them for teams. So that one, GPS, which I just mentioned, bar speed trackers are becoming more in vogue. And then, whenever I played in college, you walked in the weight room, you were handed your workout card. Well, now it's an app. Now the kids open their phones and, it's here, which, has a yin and yang. I personally still, when an athlete comes to me, I give them a notebook because I like to be able to adapt on the fly. Right. Like if a kid comes in and I'm like, hey, what do you have coming up in the next 48 hours? And they're like, well, I've got a track meet in 2 days. And I'm like, okay, well, we're banging the eccentric emphasis here. We're going to go more concentric. So it allows me to program on the fly.
Last thing you need is a bunch of micro trauma and soreness heading into the track meet. Yeah,
exactly.
All right. So what advice would you give to someone who wants a career in strength and conditioning?
I think the future will bring on a rise in technology, more analytics, so learning how to process the data, filter what's useful and relevant. I think you'll see that even begin to trickle down to the middle school level, which I'm personally not a big fan of putting metrics on any kid prior to puberty. I hate to, they've got 10 new ranking systems. Yeah. They've got it for baseball out there, and it's like you make a kid think well, okay, if I'm not at throwing 70 miles an hour at 10 years old, I'm a failure.
Right.
And it kind of dissuades that organic growth that you'd like to see. So I would say, for future coaches, be prepared for that. Don't be a technophobe because you can hate it, but you can't fight it. Right. Eventually, it's going to be there. I'd also advise them to recognize that the career can be fun and rewarding, but it also has its warts. Obviously, time away from family is a big thing. I have a son now. And I've had several professional clubs approach me, hey, will you travel out for this event, speak with our staff? And I'm like, I can't. I don't want to miss that time with my son. Pay is still an issue. Unpaid internships are the common. And it's the coaches before you did it, so they expect you to do it, which, that's an argument for another time. And then my practical advice would be, learn as many methods as you can, especially ones that run counter to the ones you did as an athlete. Right. The worst thing is a coach whose fallback excuse is, well, this is how I did it. Yeah. This is how you're going to do it.
Gather more tools, put them in your toolbox, and get them from other people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Well, how can people contact you for training or just general questions?
Email's probably the best way, Coach Potts at TopSpeedTraining.com. Other than that, my social media channels, Instagram, Twitter, are all TopSpeed LLC.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming in and chatting a bit about your career. If you have any questions for me about the KU Exercise Science program, you can email me at jtaylor@ku.edu or contact me by phone, if people still use those, which I think some do, 913-897-8516. Thanks for watching.